Well, we're going to journey with Wesley for the next few weeks, and here's a little bit of a map of how we're going to proceed. Today we're going to consider a very important question, and that is, why even think about, consider Wesley, right? Secondly, after that, we want to look at the context within which John Wesley was born, lived, and engaged in his particular ministry. And then out of that, for the final 2 weeks, considering a little more focused way his theology and his practice. So that's kind of the territory. We may not exactly confine each of these 4 topics totally to those dates, but at least this gives us a little map for where we're going. So let's start today with that very important question: why Wesley? And I think it's an important question to raise because in this church, as you would find in many churches of the Nazarene, many Methodist churches, many Wesleyan, Free Methodist churches, the name Wesley is thrown out. He's referred to, he's quoted sometimes, he's drawn upon as an authority, right? So in light of that, we need to back up maybe from time to time and say, who is this guy that we're quoting? Why do we refer to him instead of maybe some other people? So, why Wesley? 2 main points that I'd like to throw out for our consideration. First, the importance of specificity in our lives. So let me invite us to consider what we just experienced over the last 15 to 20 minutes. As we often do at the beginning of this class, we shared a prayer time, right? Did you notice the level of specificity in what was voiced and the ways in which that specificity evoked things in us? Pretty strong feeling, emotion, desire, right? Got us thinking. So, for example, someone could have said, let's just pray for peace in the world, and left it at that. A nice general statement, nothing wrong with that, but unless that gets translated into some specifics, El Paso, Dayton, right? We don't go all the way where we need to go. Or let's pray for our families, general, right? Instead of Elena, Gretchen, right? The move to specificity is important in our lives, isn't it? Let me invite you. Just several of you might just share. Can you share maybe just some other examples of where moving just from the general to the specific is really important and helpful?
Any kind of planning.
For example.
Like, okay, we need to go on vacation sometime.
Yeah. Where? When? Exactly, yeah. Vacation, holiday, as a general idea is nice, but specific holiday vacation is where it really comes together. Yeah.
Evangelism.
Okay.
Like her specific person.
A person. Yeah.
You can pray for evangelism.
Yeah.
We have 6 general superintendents,
Ah.
and rather rather than every day, bless the board of general superintendents, I have decided to take one for each day. And I pray specifically for that one.
By name.
And then on the 7th day, I pray for him.
There you go. Yeah. 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 Good.
Well, the scripture is full of specificity, but stories of people. They were real people. They were flawed. Some of them did really well, and others did really badly. Very specific
Yep.
stories.
Absolutely. Good.
Judas Iscariot.
Ah. Yes. Well, the second point that I'd like us to reflect on as we begin to consider why John Wesley is the dynamic of mentoring. How important is mentoring in our lives? If I'm remembering correctly, Jerry, as you started to pray, I think one of your starting points was your reflecting back on your own life and thinking about some people who are really influential, right, to you, people who help shape and form. Yeah, let's just take a couple of moments here, and maybe a few of you would just share, just real briefly, an example of how when mentoring was really important to you. Yeah,
Well,
Marcia.
I think any time you mentor someone, usually it's an individual,
Ah.
like a one-on-one.
Ah.
And I think that person that you are trying to help feels very special and drawn apart, that you are interested in them personally. And I think that is always uplifting to the people that you're trying to help. If they feel like that you are taking the time to deal with them and their situation above just hi and bye and go on.
The personal, one-to-one. And the mentor always has a name. Yeah, good. Someone else, just how mentoring has been important for you. Yeah.
One of the Papua New Guineans that we worked with described it in this way. He didn't know what mentoring was, but this is how he described it. He drew a little stair step. He said, I'm here on the middle. There's people up here on this next level that I want to be like, and I want to grow, and I want to learn what they're learning. There are people on the same step as me that I want to help influence, and to maybe we can kind of grow together and learn. And there's always somebody on the step below me that we can help pull up to the next step. I think that's kind of a classic way of
Nice.
describing that.
Yeah. So it always goes in both directions, doesn't it? There's mentoring and being mentored.
Sometimes at the same time.
Isn't that what this class is all
Exactly
about?
right. Peer mentoring. Yeah. Elbow.
I was thinking that it's tempting, useful to think of specific mentors.
Yeah.
On the other hand, there's the mentoring of the body of Christ.
Ah.
I think back,
Yeah.
I think of the Sunday school teachers I had as a kid.
Yeah.
You know, you sit there and mess around, smart off in class.
Kind of like you do in this class.
They are mentors, and just being amongst people who obviously care about God and want to be busy with God has a tremendous influence. It's a mentoring almost subconscious or unconscious level.
And then I think of parenting.
Oh, yes.
We have been mentored, most of us have been mentored, I hope, by godly parents. Not perfect, but godly. And then we pass that on as being mentors to the next generation. Sometimes the next generation mentors us. It's a give and take
It is. It is.
down 2 or 3 generations.
Great.
When I think of this concept of mentoring, what do we know that we haven't learned from somebody else?
Mhm.
And we mentioned this class in church, we are fortunate that we subject ourselves to the body. So there's a message there, be careful who influences you.
Mhm.
Be careful where you
Mm.
go in, get your entertainment, get your information, get your direction. I always think of the first verse of Psalm 1, you're not subject to the world and that kind of stuff. So we have to guard ourselves because we are being influenced, we are being mentored whether we know it or not. So be careful to whom you subject yourself.
I don't know if this fits or how it might fit, and I totally agree that parents are extremely important in the lives of their children and as they mentor. But recent studies in student success have shown that a variety of mentoring programs around the country have actually shown no improvement, no difference, or the mentees have been less successful than the group that were not mentored. Now, part of that could be the way the mentees are selected, and they may be higher at risk anyway. But I mean, that put the whole student affairs world kind of upside down because everyone was sure that mentoring would make this huge positive difference, but it hasn't borne out in the repeated broad research.
So it's not just a matter of taking on the name mentor or declaring oneself. There are maybe methods that prove to be fruitful and useful, and others methods and approaches that are less effective.
Really, an example just came to my mind. Phil Park has mentored a boy through the Big Brother thing.
Ah.
And you wouldn't believe the blessings that have fallen out of that. That people are coming to church. I mean, it is just like huge. It's just a little start.
There you go. Again, we're back to a name,
Right.
a specific person.
This weekend with our group, I was stunned to realize that I spent much of the time sitting beside Femi,
Ah, yes.
one of the products of this church,
Yeah, yeah.
who came to play basketball.
Yeah.
His parents were from Nigeria. He went through Olivet and Mid-American Nazarene University, a graduate of NTS. Today, he begins his first Sunday in a church plant in Milwaukee.
Really.
And he said to this group, I am here because the people at First Church of the Nazarene of Kansas City poured their lives into me.
Wow.
He named
That's great
specifically
fruit.
Dwayne Adams and Luke and Roland
Yeah.
and the kind of influence that relationships
Yeah.
that were tangibly the expressions of Christ's love. You said they held me accountable
Yep.
and they pushed me forward. I
Nice.
felt, as you begin to mention
That's great.
both the
That's great.
specificity and the relationships that was so vital in Femi.
Yeah.
And it was such a graphic description of what you're talking about.
I can't believe that much time has
Mm.
gone by. Wow. So
It is.
ready.
And his life has not been easy. He's had physical problems that could have been devastating.
Yep.
Not been easy.
Well, let's make application now of these two concepts, these two notions, specificity and mentoring, to the bigger field of the Christian life. And I would suggest that, first of all, there's no such thing as a generic Christianity. Specificity matters here. Christianity is always incarnated, to use a theological term, right? Incarnation is a word that we typically use when we're talking about Jesus Christ. God incarnate, God taking on human flesh, God living life fully in this world. That's what incarnation is. So, Christianity without specificity is not really Christianity. And this is often what happens in our world, is that Christianity can be taken on as a veneer, an external appearance thing that never acquires the specificity that living life in the flesh and in community requires. When we go deeper with it, right, then we're getting into where Jesus was, to put it another way. And then secondly, we need guides and models for the Christian life. We don't come up with this on our own, I think, is one of the points that you were suggesting there, Rick, right? We're not simple blank slates that, left to our own devices, can create everything we need. We get most of what we become from others, which is why science is even helping us appreciate more now, maybe than we have in a long time, just how interconnected a web of life we are a part of. So this idea of the isolated, autonomous individual thinking up stuff on their own, we're recognizing more and more that that's a fantasy, that's an illusion. Tony.
I remember Dr. Hahn in the Wesley weekend spoke about how, as Wesleyans and our doctrine of prevenient grace, we believe that God is at work in all people. And so that's why science or other religions to Wesley weren't offensive. They were places where he was able to recognize the God, the prevenient grace and the activity of God in that other person's life, even though it may not be fully Christian or even in our sphere of belief, but that there still are truths and influences that all are applicable.
Yeah. So, why Wesley? Well, if not Wesley, then the question I would put to you is, so who is it? Because here's what sometimes you may hear a Christian say. Maybe you've heard yourself say it. Wesley, Calvin, Luther, Pope Francis, they're all good and well, but I'm not really about any of those people. I'm just a plain Christian. I appreciate the intention behind that statement. Unfortunately, it doesn't have a grounding in reality. So what we actually have in any, and this is true in any church congregation, including our own, okay, people who would self-identify as Christians, okay, people of faith, you have those who know and are aware that they have, see the term I put up here, they have an interpretive tradition through which they have learned what it means to be a Christian and how to live that out. And then there are people who don't know they have an interpretive tradition. But everyone in the church has an interpretive tradition that guides how they read the Bible, how they understand Scripture, how they see the world around them and make sense of it, and how they make decisions about how they're going to live their life. We all have been shaped and formed by a lot of specificity, and we're either more aware of what that is and can start to name it, or we're largely unaware of it. That is, it operates outside of our conscious awareness, but it's there. This is true, I would suggest, simply because of the way we have been created. As human beings, we, from the ground up, and I use that metaphorically and literally, human beings from the ground up are creatures that need each other. We're part of a interconnected web of life, which means that mentoring, guidance, input, shaping, and forming from others is just, that's the only way we survive, let alone thrive. So, what I want to suggest out of this series that we're doing this month is not to say Wesley has to be your guy. Now, I think there's a lot to commend Wesley as a specific interpretive tradition to help one be a Christian. I think there's a lot to commend Wesley as a mentor and as a guide, but he's not the only one, right? And there could be all kinds of reasons why you would want to say, you know, there's some others whom I maybe identify with who have been very formative and shaping me, and that's okay. That's okay. But be aware, become aware, and increasingly aware of the specificity of your own formation and shaping in the faith, and become more intentional about who you give yourself to as a guide and a mentor. Came across this quotation recently. Actually, I was listening to a podcast. I don't know if any of you have ever listened to Krista Tippett's program On Being. She was doing an interview with the late John O'Donohue, and he made this statement, which I think is very profound. Tradition is to community what memory is to the individual. So let's start with the bottom part. How important is memory to the well-functioning of an individual? Wow.
If you hadn't put in well-functioning, I'd have said memory's becoming less and less important.
Are available.
There you go. Well, it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? Right? And in fact, because of a number of factors. The increasing lifespan in our cultural context, the growing awareness of dementia. We're thinking a whole lot more about memory these days and the role of it, and especially what happens when you start losing memory. The devastation of memory loss can be awful. And even outside of that maybe more drastic example, just in our own lives, how important is it to us, thinking back to our prayer time, when we hear the news about awful stuff going on in the world, which then often evokes into us in us a trajectory towards discouragement, sometimes depression. One of the things to counter that, of course, is, oh, but wait. Okay, so there's also some other good stuff happening in the world. Maybe there's potential for change. Without memory, you can't go there, right? Memory is so critical to us as individuals. What we often fail to appreciate is how important collective memory is. Although, again, isn't that interesting? In our sharing here this morning, we've named it. Another term for collective memory is tradition. Those of us who've grown up in the Church of the Nazarene have an ambivalent relationship with that word and what stands behind it. Okay. So the ambivalence sometimes comes from this idea that tradition is old, tired, formulaic ways of doing things that we've outgrown and are no longer relevant to what we need today. And when one gets in that kind of posture, and when one views tradition as that's what tradition is, then it's understandable we might want to distance ourselves from that. But if we understand rather that tradition, for example, the Wesleyan tradition, which is what we're talking about here, and there's many other traditions. Right? Tradition is the memory of a community. Then there maybe is a dynamic possibility to appreciating its role. So, what would be some characteristics that might make the Wesleyan tradition a trustworthy guide? Notice how I'm framing that. Let me just list a few things as we finish up our time here today, and then we'll pick up next week. One, this tradition, like many others, okay, I'm not suggesting that the things in this list are only true of the Wesleyan tradition, but they are true of it and make it and support they are. It's a scripture-based tradition. John Wesley really felt as though kind of the anchor starting point really needs to be what has been revealed to us through God's Word in Scripture, in part because Scripture itself, hear this, Scripture itself is part of the living tradition. Scripture is part of the memory of community we have that goes way back beyond our time. Secondly, the Wesleyan tradition is orthodoxly Christian. What do I mean by that? Orthodox is another one of those words that we may have an ambivalent relationship with because it can mean a lot of different things. On the negative side, for example, sometimes people use the word orthodoxy to refer to a strict kind of a legalism. You know, there's these things and only these few things that are true, and everybody needs to believe and understand them in the exact same way, and if you don't, you're out. So orthodoxy has been used sometimes in history as a power tool to club people with. That's not the sense in which I'm using it here. For John Wesley, orthodoxy meant going as far back as you can in the tradition, and drawing from the full length and breadth of the tradition, so that what you declare to be true is not just your own ego-centered agenda, but reflects what God has been doing through the whole of God's people, through the whole of Christian time. So for Wesley, to be orthodoxly Christian meant, for example, we pay attention to the whole of Scripture. We don't select our favorite little sections of it. We stay connected to and learn from the entire, and I use this word with small c, Catholic Christian tradition. So everything that happened before the Protestant Reformation matters and is ours. And what is happening in those branches of the church since the Protestant Reformation that are not immediately ours still matter to us and are still ours in a sense. The Wesleyan tradition is a synergistic tradition. What do you think of when you hear the word synergy? Is there a picture or an image that might come to mind? Energy, yeah. Combining, yeah. Mixing energy. Great. Yeah. For Wesley, you cannot understand the Christian life if you do not understand that it's always about the divine and the human synergistically working together. It's not just God doing things and we're passively receiving. On the other hand, it's not just it's not just our desperately trying to make things happen to please God. Human, divine. And therefore, the Wesleyan tradition emphasizes the relational and communal nature of Christian faith. Again, I think we've witnessed this here this morning, right? We've seen this. This is what it means. The Wesleyan tradition asserts that the Christian faith is lived from the heart. Now, I'm going to say more about that in an upcoming session, because what we mean by the heart is interpreted a lot of different ways. Let me just say what it doesn't mean, and then a quick statement of pointing in the direction of what. It doesn't mean living the Christian life is all about having certain emotions. That's not what it means. And that's really important, because religious faith often is very emotional and evokes and taps into our emotions, as it should. But there's always a danger there that when religious faith gets identified with a particular kind of emotion, then it always leaves some people in and some people out. And that's problematic. Live from the heart. Heart, as Wesley understood that term, and this is drawing from his understanding of Scripture, heart has to do with the entirety of our interior life. Which means heart includes your thought patterns, your emotions, your desire, and your will. All of that mixed together. Pretty complex. But here's the point. Living from the heart, having a faith that is heartfelt, for some people that means, everything's just really simple. Wesley is actually saying the opposite. Because Christianity is lived from the heart, this entire deep interior complex, it's complicated. We'll get more into that. And finally, because it is complicated, because it has to do with the interior life and not just adopting a set of external behaviors, it must be practiced. And so the Wesleyan tradition is never content with just saying, so what do you believe? What do you believe about this? What's your stand on this? How would you articulate that? As if sort of that, in and of itself, captures the essence. It's to be practiced. Specific behavioral practices that we engage in together with each other for the sake of the world. Well, so, little quote I'll just leave here in closing. Again, the point is not that you have to or should, in any kind of a way, have to consider yourself Wesleyan or adopt Wesley as your mentor. Now, being a part of, as some of you are, the Church of the Nazarene, you need to take a close look at this, because the community we call the Church of the Nazarene has been deeply formed and shaped by this guy and by this tradition. So you need to understand it, right? But there are other mentors, there are other traditions that we can draw from as well, most certainly. But in closing, I want you to see why the Wesleyan tradition commends itself, especially, I think, for our time. This Wesley is not just some marginal sidekick in history. In ways that historians are coming to appreciate more and more, he, in his thinking and his living, influenced Christianity pretty profound ways. And so you see a few of them here. Protestant evangelicalism, think of that whole big category. Methodism, right? What became the largest single denomination in the United States by the middle of the 20th century. No small thing. The holiness movement, that's where the Church of the Nazarene comes in, right? And how about Pentecostalism? Probably the single most growing dynamic branch of Christianity globally. So if Wesley has something to say that has connected with and informed and shaped all of this, then maybe there's something there for us to befriend again, learn from, draw from, gain from. That's my hope. And so that's kind of the lens that we'll be looking through over these next few weeks. So, thank you. Good to be with you. We'll see you again next week.